So, the game that we're talking about today is going to be Devil May Cry 5. Now, Ambrose, what is your first impression about that?
Well, personally, I freaking loved this game. I wasn't a big fan of the Devil May Cry series as it was coming out. I wasn't crazy about the hack and slash motif at first.
Yeah, that's
But
understandable.
I gradually got into them more and more as time went on. But I freaking loved this one. When it first came out, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, whatever. I wasn't a crazy big fan of them, but give it a try. As soon as I started playing the game, I instantly fell in love with what this game is doing. I was like, this is definitely going to be a new kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I thought it was over the top. It was a game that didn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time didn't feel like it was too cheesy to the point where you couldn't really get into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was really good. What about you? What are your impressions of the game?
Well, but first things first, I'm not really a big fan of slash and hack games. And the fact that it's by Capcom, that's kind of 2 points that I'm not really in a good favor for me.
You're not a fan of Capcom either?
No, they've done a lot of stupid things in the past. I mean, most gaming companies have, but still.
Yeah, but they've done a lot of good things too. Yeah, Mega Man and Resident Evil, those are both really good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also some of their better works, but I kind of went into this game kind of flying blind because this really isn't my cup of tea. But that's
understandable.
But I find the character V pretty interesting.
Oh, and the graphics V is a badass, dude.
They are. They're completely awesome. I think that I'm actually going to be picking this game up later on Steam and playing it.
Yeah, I would recommend it, like checking it out, just because, like, I don't know. I mean, it's you can't really do it justice just by explaining it. Sometimes it's I don't know. It's really good, but you're right though. He's a badass character to him. Like, I don't know. I didn't quite know what to expect with the way he was, but as soon as I saw that he had a freaking panther walking by his side, I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm sold. I want to play as him right now.
I know.
And then, of course, playing as Dante was really freaking badass too.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the deluxe edition of the game. So when I was playing as Nero, because you know how Nero's got the devil triggers on his arm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I got with the deluxe edition is I got a devil trigger that was basically Mega Man's Mega Buster. So that's pretty fun. It does not match the aesthetic to the game at all, but just the fact that you get to walk around with Mega Man's Mega Buster on your arm, that's pretty badass.
And it's pretty awesome that you can freeze enemies right in their place.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, it's so badass. I mean, this is a game that I could potentially get into, even though I'm not big into it, but it does have some elements that some people could enjoy, especially if they just want to hop in and have some fun.
Yeah, from what I can tell, considering, like I said, I wasn't like super into the old ones. I did play them for the most part, but this one definitely seems to kind of take a different feel of the game a little bit, like a little bit different than what the old school ones were, which you've seen that with a lot of games lately too. Like the new God of War game is taking a drastically different path than the older school ones. A lot of the new games that have come out recently have decided to, branch out and change up the formula. And I feel like that's what they did in this one. But at the same time, they changed it up enough to keep it good, keep it interesting, but not enough to the point, but not so much to the point where it's like, it doesn't quite feel like Devil May Cry anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing that it's got going for it for people who, haven't played the games as much, people like me and you, is that it's different enough that you can get into it without really feeling like it's overwhelming. So
yeah, I
really enjoyed it. I think I ended up beating it within. It's not a super long game, obviously, so I ended up beating it within like a week or so. But it's definitely a good one.
Yeah, from what I've heard and from what I've seen, they seem to be really short games, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because who wants to play a game and not feel like you're really progressing in it?
Right. I mean, as a fan of RPGs mostly too, I'm used to games that are like 20, 30, 40, 50 hours long sometimes.
Even longer than that.
Right. Like freaking Octopath Traveler last year. I think I had 100 hours on that before I finally beat it. But I think games like this that are shorter than that actually, especially for someone who's into the longer games, is a good change of pace, because it's like, hey, it's a game I can play and get done in a couple days and not have to worry about how long it's going to take me to beat it, especially when you got other games coming out that you want to play.
Exactly.
And plus, this game's got tons of replay value with the idea of just, trying to beat your scores and trying to replay all the missions and stuff like that.
No, see, that would be something that I would do because I would try to beat all my high scores and get the highest ranking as possible on all of them.
Yeah, well, you are a perfectionist, so that kind of makes sense.
Sometimes.
See, I don't get into that kind of stuff. Like, I don't try to like 100% games or like always try to get the highest scores. To me, the enjoyment is just playing the game.
Very true.
So that doesn't really appeal to me necessarily, but I can definitely see why some people might want to do that kind of thing. Like for me, when I was playing as the characters, I didn't really care, about racking up the combos and getting the S rankings and stuff like that. I just cared about like, hey, I want to just play this game and kill demons.
You just want to slash people and kill demons and all this and all that.
Right. So, yeah, overall, definitely a good game. I'd recommend it to anyone who's on the fence about it, which I guess that's going to, spoil a little bit of our ranking a little bit because, one of them is recommendation. But, hey, I recommend it. Let's go.
Alrighty. So tell me, what do you think of the plot?
So the plot, as mentioned before, it's definitely a plot that doesn't take itself too seriously. And from what I have played of the Devil May Cry games, that's a standard for the series, which is kind of a nice thing to have because it's a game you're like, oh, you're all about killing demons. You think it's going to be this, hardcore, super serious game, but it's not. Like Dante, he's kind of like a big child in some regards when he's doing a lot of the stuff he does. So, but yeah, the plot, I love a plot that's not afraid to, make jokes and stuff like that, even if it's supposed to be in a serious situation, because who am I kidding? That's what I do. But overall, I'd rate the plot maybe a 7 out of 10. Like,
that's pretty good.
It kind of felt like it was lacking in some places, like where it's just like, wait, what just happened there? Like it didn't fully elaborate on a lot of things that it could have. But for what the game was, it definitely had a very solid plot to it. What about you? What do you rate it for plot-wise?
Well, I think that it's really interesting how some of the plot is. Because some of the demons do have a similar plot where they want to go to this city and kill a bunch of people. And Dante basically is defeated and ejected. Spoiler for people who haven't played it. And his sword is shattered. Now, I think this game, for the plot itself, is actually pretty interesting. I don't know too much about it, but it just sounds really interesting. And I'm all about killing demons and all that because it's pretty fucking fun and all that.
Yeah, I mean, killing demons is definitely one of the fun things to do in games like this. You always feel really powerful killing these demons.
And it's a thing that you really don't see much in many games where you actually go out and kill demons.
Right. I feel like, though, one thing about the plot, though, that could be a little bit better, and this isn't necessarily plot per se, it's kind of like gameplay aspect a little bit too, but it seems like some of the enemies are kind of repetitive in a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the grunt enemies that you have to kill, you just kind of like, oh, I just fought like a bunch of you. Why do I have to keep fighting and all this stuff? One thing I really love about the plot is I love what they did with the quote-unquote multiplayer aspect of this game. As you go through the game, you'll notice sometimes it'll say starring, and it'll have a name on it, or sometimes it'll say starring the DMC crew. But what I love about this is that what that basically means is that while you're playing through your particular level, you're actually playing with someone else who's playing through that level at the same time. Or I think it's either that, or it's like someone has played through the level before, and then they're just like, it's like a pre-recorded idea of them. So there's certain parts where like for example, Nero and V are doing the same level. So like it'll show starring, and then it'll have the player's name on it. And then you actually, if you look over, you'll actually see that's how the other character is playing this particular style. And you can actually you can rate them on the style too. Like you can give them like, hey, good job. Or you could say nothing to them because the game doesn't let you be mean to people. This game is anti-bullying. These kids need to learn, don't you know?
They never learn.
So that's definitely one part of the plot / gameplay aspect of it that I actually really thought was a genuinely interesting way to go about it, especially because in my mind, when I first started playing the game, I was like, oh shit, does this mean that everyone's going to judge me for how badly I'm playing this game? All
right, I'm going to be giving it a 7.5. I mean, it could be better, it could be worse, but overall, it has some really good gameplay elements.
Yeah, like I said, in regards to since it's a plot that doesn't really take itself too seriously, you can't really go too high with it, but you can't really go too low with it either,
Now, what about the cinematography?
All in all, I think the cinematography is pretty solid in this game. It does a really good job of kind of capturing different aspects of like the battlefield and stuff like that. Like in the early part of the game where you're going to fight, I'm blanking on the guy's name, Urizen, I think it is, the big demon dude, right? The very beginning, you can see the different like camera angles that are going about as Nero's trying to confront him. And that's always a nice touch when you actually get to see it from different aspects and different angles and stuff like that. And then there's also a part towards the end of the game, I'm not going to spoil it for all you guys, but there's a part where Nero is trying to get involved in the fight, and it keeps on cutting back and forth to like what's happening and like all the stuff, and like just a big grandiose payoff in the end that really just kind of really drives home the desperation that's going on there. And so I think using the cinematography to capture those aspects is really cool. So honestly, I'd say 8 out of 10, probably even 9 out of 10 with cinematography, just because it does a really good job of capturing the feel of the game.
Yeah, I pretty much have to agree with what you said. I mean, the character models, they look really, really good. They look really fantastic, almost really realistic. In some regards, I almost feel like it's almost a Final Fantasy game because that's how great the graphics look on the characters and even just the scenery.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, now that you mention that, it does kind of draw a parallel to like Final Fantasy 15 to me. I don't know if you played Final Fantasy 15 at all.
Yeah, I played a little bit of it.
Yeah, so this one actually has, it does have a very similar feel to it as that 15 does, which I personally like 15. A lot of people didn't really like Final Fantasy 15 that much, but so I can see what you're talking about though. Like it does feel like a Final Fantasy game in that regard because it's got that aesthetic to it, which I think is really cool. You know, being a big Final Fantasy fan anyways.
And even that one creature that's all black and red, he looks really badass. I forgot what he's called. But when you're kind of in a battle,
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Professionals.
Right.
But still, it just looks absolutely fantastic, and I don't know, I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, the designs of the characters and stuff like that, as well as the enemies that you fight, are really cool. Like the boss fights, especially, you feel like this is a really, really cool way of doing things.
So, what is your score?
I'd say 9 out of 10.
Alrighty, and I'm going to be saying an 8.
All right, that's fair.
Now, what about the sound design?
Okay, first thing, I love the music in this game. Like that's like
yeah.
And I'm kind of that way with games, is that I feel like the music is one of the most important things about a game. Like you think of my favorite game series. You know, I love Kingdom Hearts, Legend of Zelda, and Final Fantasy. Those are like my top 3 favorite game series. And one thing other than like their plots that, you know, really drives the game forward is just the music that exists in those games. And so to me, if a game has a good gameplay, but the music doesn't really help get me involved, it's less interesting to me. So
I mean, it's always important to have, for any game, for any movie, for anything, that you have a really nice score of music, because if you don't have music that matches whatever is going on, it completely just ruins the mood. And
no, I can get behind that totally. And this game does a fantastic job of having just really good music to it. Especially, like I said, too, I have the deluxe edition of it, and it comes with a lot of like the older music from the games that you can actually put in as well. But honestly, the theme song to this game, the Devil Trigger or whatever, I forget the
Legacy.
Name of it. It's the theme song that plays in the opening part where Nero is killing all the demons and Nico's driving the van and all that stuff. The theme song is really good. Like it's just a really solid theme song. Plus I'm always a fan of a really good female vocalist if they can, So I'm a sucker for that. So honestly, the sound design of this game, like the overall music, and I know there's more to sound design than music, but the music by itself just drives the point home and makes you want to keep playing this game. So honestly, I gotta say 10 out of 10 right there. Like it's got great music to it, great sounds to it.
And I loved the song Silver Bullet and Devil Trigger.
Yeah.
Both are really good. I really liked them. And of course, as Ambrose said, there's more to games than just the music. But I found that in the games, everything sounded amazing, especially when you're playing in Dolby Atmos 5.1 surround sound. It just sounds fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it really complements the cinematography and lighting elements.
Yeah, and I feel like, when you're playing a game, the music is typically the first thing you kind of notice, other than like the gameplay, obviously. And so, and like I mentioned earlier, to me, if that music isn't spot on, I've lost interest in the game. So I don't know, just like the fact that it's just as solid as it is a really good, especially on a game that I was on the fence about from the beginning anyways. that music drives it home and really is the selling point to why I kept on wanting to play. Other than, the goofiness of the characters.
All right, what about replayability?
Replayability, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, too, when I was talking about, the length of the game, obviously this game kind of is meant to have replayability sort of like it, put into it, like just by default, because it's always about people wanting to, better their scores and, get really good at the combat and stuff like that. Personally, that's not my style necessarily. I don't, go out of my way to replay a lot of like just because I want to do better at it, unless it's like a story thing. Like, hey, if you do this good in it, then unlock this or something like that. That's something I can get behind. But just replaying certain levels for something like that, it's not really my style, but I can definitely see why some people get into something like that. But as far as replayability goes, I got to give it a solid 7 out of 10, because it's definitely a game I can see myself replaying in the future. It's good, and it's not a very long game, so the fact that it's a shorter game you can just kind of pick up and play in a couple of days is kind of something that is a good thing for a good game to be replayable, because you don't have to spend much time trying to get back into it. You just into it and you play it for a couple of days and you're done, So having that regard, it's definitely good replayability. So I say, yeah, solid 7 out of 10 in the face. And since I can clearly see why people are going to replay it even immediately after finishing it, just because they want to keep doing better and better. Again, not my style, but I do plan on playing it at some point in the future anyways. So yeah, solid 7 out of 10.
No, I'm planning on replaying this as well, because it is really short, it is really fun, even though this really isn't my type of game. But you know what? Sometimes you have to play a game a couple of times just to enjoy it and really get the full impact of how amazing the game plays.
It's interesting that you say that, because in a lot of ways that's not necessarily a good thing, because to me, like if you have to play a game a couple times to enjoy it, it feels like that was kind of like, what was the point, unless it's a game where you're meant to play it more than once because things like a new game plus, or the story changes after you play it a couple times. But like a game where just like, oh, I didn't really like it the first time, but maybe if I play it again I'll like it. It's like that seems kind of pointless to me.
I mean, that's a fair point.
But I can see where you're getting from, though. Like sometimes sometimes you might enjoy it the first time, but once you play it again, you fully enjoy it. You're like, oh, that's something I didn't notice last time, or hey, there's these new things I can do that I didn't realize I could do. And so to that regard, I could totally see where you're coming from.
But I am going to give it a 7.5.
Oh, you just gotta outdo me, don't you?
No. Now, what about recommendation?
So as I mentioned earlier, I would recommend playing this, even if you're not really a fan of the hack and slash genre. This one is a good sense to get into the game. And honestly, I don't remember much of the plot of the older games, so I'm thinking to myself, hey, I probably should have played those other games recently. But honestly, picking up Devil May Cry 5, I didn't really feel like I was like confused about the story. I understood enough of it, like, hey, okay, I get where this is coming from. So even if it's like your first Devil May Cry game, you probably won't have too much of a problem just picking it up and playing. So yeah, I recommend it. It's definitely a niche game that you have to put effort maybe into playing it if you're not used to this kind of gameplay style. So I'd say 7 out of 10 for recommendation too. It's definitely a good game. I recommend it to play at least once, give it a try. And that's coming from me, a guy who, I didn't like hack and slash games for so long. Granted, my game tastes have evolved over the years too. So What about you?
It's kind of hard, but I'm going to give it a 6, because even if you don't enjoy the game itself, you're going to at least like the music, because it is pretty badass. And you may not enjoy the first few minutes of the game, but it will slowly grow on you and you're enjoying.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 6.5 in that regard.
All right, well that's a solid thing for recommendation. But no, that's solid. Especially in the regard that it's not something that either of us have really dabbled with that much in the past. So yeah, I can definitely see where that's coming from. I think that's a good solid score for that game. Now, obviously, this is a shorter episode of what we're doing today, because me and Fuzzy and PasMorning, who you may have noticed wasn't here on this episode, we've been feeling pretty crappy the past few days, so we just kind of wanted to talk about the game and sort of be done. So this is a shorter episode today, but hopefully we'll be feeling better next time and we'll be able to actually get back into our regular format. So,
and if the audio sounds different, it's because that we're actually doing a remote session where I'm at my house and Ambrose is at his. So
you don't know that.
I will try to match up. Well, they know now.
They don't know that I'm at my house. I could be at the library for all you know.
He could be at a coffee shop drinking coffee.
Am I a hipster?
Find out next time.
All right, so yeah, that's our sort of discussion on Devil May Cry 5. We apologize for being unprofessional today. We're still both getting over sicknesses and stuff like that. So, with that being said, leave a like if you enjoyed what we had to say about this. Leave a comment down below about your thoughts on Devil May Cry 5. Subscribe to keep up to date on what we're doing next. And with that being said, I'm Ambrose.
I'm Fuzzy.
And we'll see you next time.